Good evening. I'm going to say from the outset that there's been a full investigation into the complaint, and the Public Service Ombudsman of Wales has upheld all my complaints and held that there were serious failings and breaches of human rights, amongst other things, at the Aneurin Bevan Health Board. I'm turning my point tonight to false allegations specifically to me, and also generally how they affect people. And I have to say that my solicitor is fully aware that I'm making this statement tonight. False allegations are an incredibly dangerous, malicious weapon to use against somebody. It can affect someone emotionally, it can affect their livelihood, and the consequences can be absolutely devastating. It can ruin lives. On the 25th of September, I walked onto the ward to see Brian, who'd been in hospital a week. He had been admitted on the 18th of September with a chest infection, and they'd incidentally found out that he'd got low sodium. When I saw him, he looked depressed, and he said that the doctor who'd been on the ward the year before, and she'd then written him off and said she prescribed end-of-life drugs. When she saw him, she said, I never thought I'd see you again. We both didn't take this very well. Within 5 minutes, I was told the doctor will see you now. I didn't know I was seeing a doctor. I'd come to see Brian and spend my visiting time with him. I was ushered into the office, which was a small room the size of a bathroom. I was met by 4 people. The doctor, Martha Scott, Nicola Marsh, the ward sister, a man called John Trezise, and another woman. I was immediately accused of being the cause of Brian's low sodium, and I was accused of giving him or telling him to take extra frusemide when it had, so they said, been stopped months before. They said due to this I had to go, and I could only visit for 1 hour twice a week. I could barely hear what they were saying. I mean, I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. This was like a punch below the belt. It almost made me reel. Firstly, let me get things straight. The facts are that it was not unprescribed, it was very much prescribed, and here is a prescription. Secondly, why would I give Brian medication? It was in the notes that he took his own. He'd been questioned that morning. Brian was in full charge of his faculties. He took his own medication at home, and it just seemed very odd. Where did it all come from, and why were they asking? The man, Trezise, was vile. Out of nowhere, he suddenly said, you need to be contained. Of course you contain wild animals, or a virus. He's since denied saying this, but it was said. This man is now in bereavement care. I remember feeling very faint. I had no warning of this coming. I can't remember much more. I can't even remember if I said goodbye to Brian. I know that at 5:05 p.m. I was on the phone to Carwyn Jones in the Welsh Government, though not sure what that good would do. I was both enraged by the false accusations which came out of the blue, but I was also devastated. After all, he'd been in hospital a week, so why did no one say anything to me then? This is what the Ombudsman asked. It didn't make sense to him either. Why did they not check that this tablet, this medication, was prescribed? I've shown you the prescriptions. Surely it would have been simple for these people in authority, a nurse on a ward, a doctor, to check things out. The Mars charts for the hospital show as well, which the Ombudsman pointed out, because they did such a thorough investigation, that they themselves had given frusemide on the 18th of September. And the Ombudsman questions the wisdom of this and the duplicity. I went home. I'm not quite sure how I got there. I knew I was able to see Brian tomorrow at 2 p.m, but I had to leave at 3 with that woman Marsh. The second thing I did after phoning Carwyn Jones was to write an email to Judith Paget, the CEO, stating that I was very concerned about the safety on that ward. I wrote the email and I said I was concerned for his safety on that ward with those staff. And the email is here. I consider that to be contemporaneous evidence of alarm, my alarm. Of course, with the Ombudsman's investigation, they uncovered that the withholding or withdrawing of visiting rights for me breached Brian's human rights and also breached mine, and that they'd violated their own hospital policy. Normally, if somebody didn't like something or something had happened, you would be given a verbal warning and then a written warning and then a contract would be drawn up, and that is how the hospital policy goes. But to get me out of the way quickly, this was the only way they could do it. And they had to get me out of the way quickly to trump up a false accusation. My solicitor said, with the benefit of hindsight, and hindsight is a wonderful thing, that no wonder he had low sodium with a tumour the size of a tennis ball in his gullet that had remained undiagnosed until an autopsy was insisted on due to the behaviour of the hospital and the staff. On the 25th of August, he'd had a CT scan, which they said was normal. 30 days later, he was dead, and the tumour was the size of a tennis ball. The doctor was also found to have misled the coroner, as she told them that this false accusation, but missed out telling the coroner about their own medication error that afternoon on the day that he died. Brian sadly had died 48 hours after I had my visiting curtailed due to a shocking mistake by the staff. He was given medication in error, and they have admitted it, but they don't admit that it killed him. They, however, made no note of the error. There's no datix, and there's no note of the error in the notes. There's a note that they gave him the medication, but the 5 R's is the gold standard: the right medication, the right patient, the right dose, the right route, and the right time. So the GMC codes and the NMC codes were completely violated. I wonder what Andrea Sutcliffe has to say about this. Shockingly, due to their accusations, I was not with Brian, and I wasn't even told until it was too late, and I never saw him again. Apparently, within 20 minutes of being given this medication, he couldn't breathe. He had unrecordable saturations, and he was dead within 90 minutes. My forensic expert has given his report as well on this, as well as my solicitor. The forensic expert, here is the very, very important highlighted statement that he made. I will read it to you. It is plausible that death would have occurred over the next few weeks, but it is not likely based upon the evidence to have occurred on that day. It is for the coroner to decide whether the death was from natural causes, i.e. aspiration pneumonia, or due to a drug side effect, and further whether any negligence contributed to the death, i.e. a medication error, which is negligence. My forensic expert also sadly pointed out that if I'd been there, that medication error probably wouldn't have happened. I can't forgive these people for what they did. The false allegations could have ruined a career. However, they forced Brian to die alone, dehydrated, without food, and alone. nobody with him, calling out for me. At 1 p.m. he'd been walking around the ward, completely mobile, ringing me up, asking me to get him out of the hospital. He wanted to come home. It was a kind of urgency, maybe a fear. He didn't want to stay there. Maybe he had a sixth sense that something bad was going to happen. I can't forgive. The false allegations were put on the dole's form, and of course this is a legal document which would go to the Court of Protection, and so it is a fraud. It is a serious offence too. The Ombudsman held that it was illegally implemented as there was no capacity test, all the details on the dole's form were wrong, and therefore he was falsely imprisoned. He was held against his will. That alone is an offence, and that offence is punishable by up to 10 years in prison. The dole's form would have gone before the Court of Protection, and that is a very serious thing, to falsify any contents of that dole's form. I also have to say that Brian's consultant later spoke up for me and said, you know, of course, we did everything correctly as he had instructed. And, you know, why did this happen? I really don't know. But this is, the coroner has had the Ombudsman's report and has not, the coroner has had the Ombudsman's report. The Ombudsman's report put a completely different picture on Brian's death and the cause of his death, and yet nothing has been done. There's been no inquest. I was never considered. I was demoted from next of kin, and I was taken out of making the funeral arrangements due to their false accusations. However, it is very important because the coroner should have looked at the Ombudsman's report. It put a completely different picture on the cause of his death, and there'd already been 2 death certificates. I am an interested party due to it's in the Coroner's Act that I am an interested party. Any partner, spouse, civil partner is an interested party. I'm going to finish here because it's going to go on too long otherwise, but this is a very important podcast. Thank you.